Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, where we sift through the complexities of modern health and try to make sense of it all. I'm Ethan Foster, your resident observer of the human condition, like a watchful statue, only with a bit more commentary.
And I'm Alara Sky, ready to unleash my wit in the name of better health. If you've never heard us before, brace yourself. Ethan offers the driest takes since the Sahara, and I occasionally jab him with my quick tongue, all in the service of knowledge, of course.
Today we're diving into a topic that might make you think twice before your next sip of water. We'll be discussing something that usually doesn't get top billing in the dinner table conversation: nitrates. Specifically, nitrates in your drinking water.
The big news is that a 2024 study found if there's any nitrate in your water, you could have a 73% increased risk of cancer mortality. And if that statistic just made your jaw drop, let it land gently. There's more where that came from. For every 10-fold increase in nitrate levels, you get a 69% higher risk of dying from cancer.
I know, that's not exactly the comedic icebreaker everyone hopes for. But, we promise, we'll keep the conversation lively, while also reminding you there are ways to protect yourself. Don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom, just some gloom with a few comedic side notes.
Let's start with the basics. The EPA currently sets a legal limit for nitrates in drinking water at 10 milligrams per liter. That standard was created to prevent blue baby syndrome in infants. Great for preventing that condition, but it's not exactly shielding us from other nitrate-related health risks, like cancer. So, you might say the standard is a bit out of date.
It's like using a decades-old phone charger for your brand new smartphone. It'll fit if you wiggle it, but the battery's going to complain. And in this case, our health is the battery.
Right, and the data suggests we need a serious update. It's like trying to run the latest computer games on a Windows 95 machine. You'll get 8-bit graphics when you're supposed to be living in a high-definition world.
Maybe some folks like retro, but in health matters, retro often means outdated and, in this context, possibly dangerous. According to more recent studies, your odds of a cancer-related problem can rise even if you're below that 10 milligrams per liter threshold.
That's the kicker. Even safe levels aren't all that safe, apparently. The 2024 research is fairly crystal clear. Once nitrates show up, your risk climbs. And if the levels climb, well, your risk hikes right along with them like an overly enthusiastic mountain climber.
So, how did we get into this predicament? Let's talk a bit about the EPA's reevaluation of nitrates that kicked off in June 2023. It's not that they never thought of it before. Apparently, their own scientists suggested it 15 years prior. But as with many things in large organizations, progress moves like molasses in winter.
And that's if nobody's actively trying to freeze the molasses. In this case, the big freeze comes from certain food and agriculture industry groups that insist any tightening of the rules would cost too much and wouldn't yield benefits. In other words, they want to protect their bottom line while we're just trying to protect our health.
It's almost as if they're saying nitrate contamination is no big deal, while holding a giant yardstick behind their back to measure the profit margins. Meanwhile, data suggests we might be playing with fire, or at least with a silent health threat.
Indeed. There's also some confusion about the difference between nitrates in vegetables versus nitrates in water. Industry proponents wave around studies about the benefits of nitrates in produce, conveniently forgetting that vegetables come with protective compounds. Water contaminated with nitrates is basically a direct hit of the stuff. No helpful sidekick molecules in sight.
So your spinach smoothie might have nitrates, but it also has vitamins, antioxidants, and possibly enough fiber to keep your body's internal checks in place. Whereas your tap water with nitrates is more like an uninvited party crasher. No protective friends, just trouble.
Exactly. That's why many health advocates argue we need to assess nitrates in drinking water differently than the nitrates we encounter from produce. It's not one size fits all. It's more like one size should stay far away from our water supply.
Let's also mention the broader health concerns. A 2022 systematic review of 60 different research papers found a near doubling of gastric cancer risk for every 10 milligrams per liter increase in nitrate concentration in drinking water. So if you've got high levels, your stomach might not be the happiest place on earth.
That's scarier than dropping your phone into a sewer grate. At least with the phone, you can go buy a new one. Your stomach is a bit more irreplaceable. Once nitrates enter your system, your body can convert them into nitrites. Then, in the acidic environment of your stomach, they can form nitroso compounds. Some of those are known carcinogens.
So basically your stomach becomes a chemistry lab, a poorly supervised one at that. If you remember your high school chemistry class, this is akin to that day you broke a test tube, except the stakes are a lot higher now.
Exactly. So the question is, why have we been so slow to address this? Part of the answer lies in the usual suspects: money, politics, and a regulatory framework that hasn't caught up with modern science.
Yes, and there's the added argument from some industry-linked researchers who claim the current acceptable daily intake of nitrates is too low and could be quadrupled. Apparently they think if a little is bad, a lot is better. That's one logic twist I can't quite follow.
Reminds me of the logic that if you break your leg in 2 places, why not break it in 4? We might be missing a critical piece of the puzzle there. Independent scientists have countered those claims by saying that's not how biology works.
Precisely. Meanwhile, people in agricultural regions are experiencing the fallout. Nitrate contamination is rampant in areas with heavy fertilizer use or large-scale livestock operations. It's a problem that's been simmering for decades.
Now it's at a rolling boil, and you can't just lift the pot off the stove. But there are solutions, and we're going to talk about those. We're not here to say panic everybody. We're here to say take some proactive measures and help drive bigger changes.
Yes, even though the data can seem grim, knowledge is power. So let's get into what folks can do to safeguard their water and potentially push for broader reforms.
First up, reverse osmosis filters. No, it's not a space-age contraption from your favorite sci-fi show. It's actually a widely available filtration system that can remove nitrates from your drinking water. If you're worried about contamination, this might be the single most impactful step you can take at home.
Definitely. Reverse osmosis is basically the bouncer at the club, telling nitrates, you're not on the list, please step aside. It's an investment, but so is your health. Given the data, it's an investment that might make a lot of sense.
Next, you'll want to know your water source. Are you on a public water system or using a private well? Public systems often publish test results, so check those out. Private wells? You'll want to test that water regularly at a certified lab.
Think of it as part of your routine. Some people take their car for an oil change every few months. You can do the same for your water. Get it tested on a schedule. Don't wait until a weird smell or color shows up. Nitrates are sneaky. They won't necessarily have a smell or a taste.
Then we have the bigger picture approaches. For instance, advocate for stricter drinking water regulations. That might sound daunting, but even writing to your local representatives can send a message that voters actually care about nitrate contamination.
It's a bit like telling your city council, hey, how about we address the invisible threat in our water before it gives us very visible medical bills? Public pressure can be surprisingly effective if enough people speak up.
And let's talk about sustainable agriculture. Conventional farming often uses synthetic fertilizers that can run off into water supplies, boosting nitrate levels. Supporting farmers who use sustainable methods, regenerative farming, permaculture, or organic practices, can help reduce that contamination at the source.
It's putting your money where your mouth is, literally. If more of us buy from local, sustainable farms, we encourage better land management. That eventually helps clean up the water supply. Or, at the very least, it stops making it worse.
Right. It's a collective effort. We all share the same planet, and water doesn't like to obey property lines. If one farm pollutes a river, that pollution can travel hundreds of miles. No passports needed.
Exactly. Finally, stay informed and spread the word. When you learn about a potential hazard like nitrates, share it with your friends and family. People might look at you funny. Wait, nitrates? Isn't that what's in bacon? But the more folks who know, the more likely we are to see broader change.
Yes, it might not be as catchy as take daily vitamins, but hey, check your water for nitrates could be the new mantra if enough people pick it up.
Let's circle back to the scientific findings for a moment, just to underscore the seriousness. The 2024 study published in Public Health pointed out that simply detecting any nitrate in your water was associated with a 73% increased risk of dying from cancer. That's a big number. We're talking about nearly doubling the risk in some cases.
And for every tenfold increase in nitrate levels, that risk jumped by 69%. Clearly, the more nitrates, the worse the odds. This underscores why just under the EPA limit might not be good enough. It's not an on-off switch. It's more like a dimmer that gets gradually darker the more nitrates creep in.
The review from Environmental Research in 2022 ties high nitrate levels to stomach cancer. That's another piece of this puzzle. You might think, well, I eat pretty healthy. I avoid processed foods. Great. But what if your drinking water is quietly contributing to gastric risk? That's the hidden dimension people don't always consider.
Right. Everyone's so focused on cutting sugar, watching carbs, or avoiding certain fats, yet they might miss the fact that their water is the biggest gatecrasher. You can eat the cleanest diet, but if you're ingesting nitrates through water, you're still playing with fire.
Indeed. And the science behind it is that nitrates convert to nitrites in the body. In the stomach, those nitrites can form nitroso compounds, which are known to be carcinogenic. It's a biochemical chain reaction we'd rather avoid.
Yes, let's keep that particular chemistry set off the kitchen table. We have enough on our plates without adding carcinogenic compound formation to the list.
Now, how do we realistically address this? Start at home, yes, but push for bigger changes if you can. Water is a shared resource. Nobody owns the entire supply. If we want to keep it clean, we need collective solutions.
That's why advocating for stricter regulations is so important. Sure, maybe a new regulation means you have to pay a little more in taxes, or local farms need to adjust their practices. But is that cost greater than dealing with rising cancer rates? That's the question.
It's a trade-off. Either pay for solutions now or pay with your health later. And the health bill can be infinitely higher.
And the pushback from industry is predictable. They argue it's too expensive, or that the science is inconclusive. But if we waited for perfect science to act, we'd still be debating if seatbelts are necessary in cars.
Precisely. Meanwhile, some experts highlight that certain industries fund studies claiming that nitrate standards could be quadrupled. That's a bit like a tobacco company funding research that says secondhand smoke is harmless. Always look at who's behind the curtain.
That's a big reason we need truly independent science to guide policy. People without a vested interest in selling more fertilizer or covering corporate liabilities.
Indeed. Ultimately, the nitrate issue is a microcosm of a larger challenge in public health. How do we use evidence to shape regulation when there's money to be made on the other side?
And that's where everyday folks come in. Politicians and regulators respond when enough constituents make noise. So if you're concerned about nitrates, and you probably should be, make sure your voice is heard.
Now, I'd like to pivot to the solutions one more time, just to give listeners a clean summary. Number 1, consider installing a reverse osmosis system if it's in your budget. It's one of the most effective ways to reduce nitrates in your home water.
Number 2, test your water, whether you're on a well or municipal supply. If you're in a city, see if your local water authority publishes nitrate data. If you're on a well, get a proper test. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of, well, you know the rest.
Number 3, push for regulations that consider modern science. The old standard was primarily about preventing blue baby syndrome. That's important, but now we know there's more to worry about.
Number 4, support sustainable agriculture. The less runoff from synthetic fertilizers, the fewer nitrates end up in our waterways. Vote with your wallet and your plate.
And number 5, stay informed and share what you learn. The more people who realize this is an issue, the faster we can drive collective action.
Perfect summary. Let's also take a moment to acknowledge that this might feel daunting. After all, water is supposed to be the most fundamental, life-giving substance. To find out it could be polluted by something that raises our cancer risk is unsettling.
True, but that's why we call this show Cellular Wisdom. We believe that knowledge at the cellular level, understanding how these chemicals affect our bodies, empowers us to make better choices. It's not about scaring people, it's about giving them the tools they need.
Right. And ironically, once you confront the facts, you can do something about them. Maybe you buy a filter or talk to your local council. Perhaps you switch to a farm co-op that uses less fertilizer. All those steps might seem small, but collectively they become significant.
They do. And ultimately, we're all in this together. Water doesn't care about your zip code. If nitrates are high in one area, they can eventually affect neighboring regions. So, it benefits everyone to address it head on.
Indeed. Now let's emphasize that none of this is to say water is unsafe by default. Many areas do have relatively low nitrate levels. But do you know your local numbers? If not, maybe it's time to find out.
Because the data from the 2024 and 2022 studies suggests it's not only the hot zones that need worry. Even small amounts of nitrate can correlate with elevated cancer risks. It's a gradient, and we want to be as close to the safe side as possible.
Absolutely. To tie it back, a 73% increase in cancer mortality risk is nothing to scoff at. And a 69% increase for every tenfold jump in nitrate levels is equally concerning. These aren't minor footnotes. They're big red flags.
And that's precisely why the EPA has finally taken steps to reevaluate nitrate risks. We just have to ensure those steps aren't blocked by endless stalling tactics. If they move forward, we might see new guidelines that are more aligned with current science.
Let's hope so. It's never fun to learn your water might come with a side of carcinogens. But the silver lining is that if we pay attention now, we can shape a healthier future. It might take time, but it's worth the effort.
Yes, indeed. In the meantime, while regulators and industries duke it out, everyday people can take their own measures. That's what we're advocating. Control what you can at home and stay vigilant about the bigger picture.
Right? Start with small steps, like testing your water. Then consider a filter. After that, raise your voice in the community. Educate a neighbor. It might sound cliché, but real change often starts in these small, local ways.
Exactly. And that's the essence of what we do here on Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. We highlight the hidden hazards and the overlooked opportunities so that you can fortify your health from the inside out.
I'd say it's a reminder that the simplest things in life, like water, can become complicated if we don't pay attention to how they're managed. But we're not powerless. We have options, from filtration to policy change.
Couldn't agree more. My final thought is that while the numbers can sound frightening, they're also a call to action. Nobody expects you to fix the entire planet's water supply by yourself. But if each of us does a bit, we can make a collective difference.
Well said. That's it for today's deep dive into nitrates and your drinking water. Thanks for joining us on Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, where we explore the intricacies of health without forgetting to sprinkle in some humor.
Indeed, stay curious and stay proactive. Until next time, remember, your cells are listening. What you feed them, food, water, or knowledge, really matters.
Take care, everyone, and see you on the next episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom.
Keep sipping. Just make sure you know what's in the glass. Farewell for now.